Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we're just going to be talking about in preparation, I should say, for 28 years later, the new Danny Boyle sequel to the original and possibly the second 28 movie as well. We will be discussing 28 days later and 28 weeks later. Very interesting to revisit both of these films this past week. My name is Victor, your host, and usually trying to introduce all of you and provide some context for something we'll be watching in the next week. And in this episode, I'll be joined by Darren.
G'day there, Victor.
Happy Father's Day. Is it Father's Day for you out there, Darren?
It is not. I think Father's Day for us is in August, September, something like that. So Mother's Day is the same, but Father's
Nice.
Day is different for some reason.
Interesting.
Happy Father's Day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just mentioned to you before we started recording, but because it's Father's Day, we were away for the weekend. We were staying with family. On the way home, I visited my sister, and we hung out there with her for a little bit. And then we hit some traffic because it was raining on the way back. And then we picked up some sushi before we got home, and I finished eating and plugged in the computer, and here I am, just minutes before, like still processing my sushi as we speak.
Excellent. Yeah, we were away for the weekend as well, but it's Monday morning now.
Yes,
so,
it's work time for you, exactly.
Yeah.
Or nearly. Okay, I think we'd probably have enough to talk about with just these two shows, or these two films, I should say, and maybe just previewing a little bit our expectations for 28 years later, which I may be seeing tomorrow. Be very exciting if I can get to see it early. I will let you know, spoiler free, of course, my opinion at that point. And anybody follow me on Letterboxd, check the show notes for that. If I am able to post an early review, I will make the initial review spoiler free. So, Darren, a little context on 28 years later, because it's very interesting in the trajectory of the creatives that, of course, have reunited 25 years later. I said 28 last week. They didn't quite make it all the way to 28. It's 25 years later for this new film. But, of course, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. Alex Garland has become much more high profile since perhaps even more relevant film figure in the past few years than Boyle himself, considering the way Boyle has kind of gravitated towards TV. But this is a very interesting moment for both of them. We have on the side of Danny Boyle, he's actually a generation older than a lot of these people that are considered his contemporaries. He had been working on British TV for a long time, finally made Shallow Grave. Have you ever seen Shallow Grave, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. I was introduced to Shallow Grave, so that was the first Danny Boyle movie I ever saw, and loved it. What a caper!
A terrific thriller. Yeah, exactly. Love these type of mysteries. Yeah. It's kind of noir. It's really like a noir more than anything else. Really exciting.
Yes.
And these people, Ewan McGregor made him or started his career. And of course, we see Eccleston in 28 Days Later, who of course we saw very importantly in that first film.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I do remember seeing that. There was also an actress in it who went in to have a good career as well.
She's been in a lot of things since then. Yeah.
Young people just making a killer film that just went wild.
And we see these same actors, not only did they become very famous actors over this time of working with Boyle and in this era of British cinema, really having like a new renaissance internationally, but also the fact that these same actors keep turning up in Boyle's projects as you go forward. And then, of course, he followed that up with Trainspotting, which once again, just like Shallow Grave, there was a lot of buzz about that. I saw it here in theater, Shallow Grave, that is. It really was not a hit here in the US, but around the world, a huge hit. And then even more so, Trainspotting was a minor hit in the US, definitely a cult hit, like a college hit. If you were in college, you were definitely watching that movie, but it never really made a lot of money here until maybe in ancillaries once it showed up on DVD, etc. But around the world, this movie and the soundtrack were a phenomenal success. So it really put him on the map. And then he followed that up. He came to Hollywood. He made A Life Less Ordinary, a film that I like, but is really a mess, like a huge mess. Have you ever seen this film?
Look, I think I've seen it. I was in high school when Trainspotting came out, so I got my dad to take me, and we just absolutely loved it. And it changed my life. The energetic style of the filming and the soundtrack introduced me to Iggy Pop and all these other acts that I'd never heard of. I've seen A Life Less Ordinary, but I cannot remember a thing about it, so I think it's a little bit forgettable for me.
I kind of have a soft spot for that movie. It is a rom-com and also has some like sci-fi elements and also is a fantasy with these angels trying to save these people. It also is a gangster movie where like literally people get heads blown off and stuff. Mixing all these genres together, it's like a blank check for him, just putting way too many things together. And I kind of love it for its energy and its craziness, and that it doesn't quite work, but it almost works, even with these crazy elements that should not work together. But it's more an acquired taste. But I have to say, even though I like the movie, I've seen it once in the theater, maybe one time after that, all the way through. I may not have even seen the whole film again. But this was a soundtrack that I listened to all the time. And this is like a running theme. Great soundtracks for Danny Boyle movies.
Absolutely, yeah. I just feel like everyone was so hyped up after Trainspotting that it was
Yes.
just a little bit of a letdown. That's kind of my general feeling of what 1997 was like. I mean, looking at his filmography in front of me, there's not many misses. So yeah, he's been pretty consistent, much more consistent than a lot of directors, to be honest.
Oh, I agree. And even I think you hinted at this last week when we were discussing that even when he misses, there's always something interesting about even his misses. Of course, after A Life Less Ordinary, his first dipping of the toe into Hollywood, then he goes and makes what is considered a disaster, The Beach. And I remember seeing The Beach and not liking it. I rewatched it last year when I did my recap of Alex Garland's career, because Alex Garland wrote the book, not the movie, but the book that The Beach is based on. And that's how he met Danny Boyle, although he did not like the adaptation. But interestingly enough, they became partners after that, even though I guess they were critical of the work nonetheless. And I have to say that at that point, I rewatched The Beach, and maybe with the distance of not being so disappointed, I, as a Danny Boyle fan, a little disappointed with A Life Less Ordinary, maybe even more so with The Beach. Of course, all the hype of this is DiCaprio's first film after Titanic. He waited 2 years to make this movie. The expectations were off the charts. This film actually made money. It made a lot of money, actually, based on its relatively modest budget. But whatever it made, people were expecting it to make at least 2 or 3 times what it made. And, it did better than break even, it solidly turned a profit. But that was not the expectation after DiCaprio's follow-up to Titanic. Obviously, nothing would have been okay. And this was definitely not what anybody wanted to see. Have you seen this movie? And what did you think of it?
Yeah, look, I have seen it. I saw it in the cinema, and I must admit I was a little disappointed by it because I was a massive fan of the novel.
Yeah.
Now, I read the novel when I was in university, and I think I was the same age as the character. So I had these dreams of traveling and these dreams of traveling off the beaten track. And the novel did an incredible job. I feel like it was Alex Garland's first novel.
It is.
It did an incredible job.
He started in college. He wrote it and started writing it in college.
I mean, it's just brilliant. I mean, I recommend that to anyone. And it has a very different ending to the film.
Yes,
and I
very
think
different.
That's one of the reasons that I was quite disappointed in the film. But the first half was fantastic in the way they portrayed Thailand, the way they portrayed the actual beach, and what happens on that beach. But I feel like they tried to shoehorn a romantic angle in there for DiCaprio, which was not in the novel. I think it just petered out for me. But still super interesting.
Yeah, I think the best of that movie does an excellent job of translating the book. And the worst of it, even the worst of it, some of the adaptation choices. Carlyle again, but Robert Carlyle, I should say, who of course was in Trainspotting and will turn up again in this conversation. But Robert Carlyle as the crazy guy who gives him, I forget the character's name, but the guy who gives him the map to start with. So these characters keep iterating in Boyle's work.
Begbie, yeah.
I was about to say Begbie. Yeah, imagine they just give him the same name. That'd be great.
I've just followed his career from Begbie. Just when he pops up. I haven't seen him for a long time, but whenever he pops up, it's so enjoyable to see him.
I just saw him in something recently. I can't put my finger on it though, but we'll have to do a whole Robert Carlyle side conversation as well. So after The Beach, he admittedly feels like he's kind of at sea. He probably could have gotten, I think he had lined up some other Hollywood stuff, probably like a sequel or something. They wanted him to do kind of generic, action movie or something, put a little extra sauce on it, Danny. And he just felt like this isn't working for me. So he kind of rebooted his career. Really fascinating. So early on that he actually took a step back and rebooted things. And he made a couple of BBC movies. I haven't seen either one of these. One's called Strumpet, and one is called Vacuuming. What is it? Vacuuming Companion Guide. It's just two really like 1.5 hour, almost like one act plays transcribed. And I haven't seen either one of these, and I don't even think they're available on DVD. But it was a way for him. He shot it all on a standard issue consumer video, so that costs would be cheap. He would be very flexible, and I think it was just an exercise to kind of cleanse his palate. But of course, from that, he brought that style to 28 Days Later. We'll take a pause here and continue this conversation going through his career. But next week, we will close the gap between these two, because he's had a very interesting career between 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later. And it's been quite a career, quite a road for him, and lots of drama in between as well. A lot of failed projects that were very high profile. Of course, we have arrived at 28 Days Later, which I wasn't planning on rewatching because I had just seen it a year ago when I did my Alex Garland retrospective. But I put it on saying, like, I'll just watch a few scenes. And I got to tell you, maybe of all the times I've seen this movie, this went down so easy. It just flew by. It was like really like a strange thing to say about this movie, but a very pleasurable watch. Given the fact that this looks like absolute garbage, like the quality of this has just gotten worse and worse. And I think that even that this is now available digitally, I don't think they're, enhancing. They could definitely upscale this, I should say, is basically the point I'm making. And the copies I found of this, including the one that is available in the US for free on Pluto, by the way, everybody, it's finally available. But even like a digital rental version, the preview of it that I looked at, like the quality is pretty dingy. But nonetheless, I remember seeing this in movie theaters and being blown away, really thrilled. And not only that, I almost didn't want to see this in theaters when it came out because I could care less about zombies. There had not been like a zombie movie in the US in like 10 or 15 years. And after 28 Days Later, and also the, what were those, the video game adaptation, Resident Evil and 28 Days Later came out the same year. And like within 2 years or something, there were like 2, 3, 5 big budget zombie projects and TV shows. Of course, The Walking Dead, like it became everything was zombie. But it's hard to believe for most of our listeners, probably too young to remember this, but zombie things were not a thing when this movie came out. And wow, it blew away everybody. So when did you first see this and what was your revisit like?
I saw it in the cinemas and remember loving it and being very interested in the digital photography. And I've got a lot to say about this, the way that they shoot this.
Yeah.
And I saw it last week and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Just like you said, I mean, there hadn't been a zombie project for ages and I couldn't remember one in the 90s. And so it really just reboot the whole thing, and everything comes from this. All the kind of situations, and they deal with everything in this short film.
Yep.
I think it's less than 90 minutes. I mean, it's incredible, and I think the way that they shoot it, because of the limitations of this digital camera that they use, they really strive to get more arty kind of effects or angles,
interesting look,
compositions, and they really look for it to kind of bring forward something, because it, as you say, it just looks like crap. And I think there is a shot in it, and I think they've used an in-camera digital effect. There's a shot of a car driving past like a field of flowers, and I feel like they've used one of these weird effects that you would never use. They've just switched it on, and it kind of makes the flowers look all painterly in the foreground. It looks terrible, and I laughed out loud. I haven't sorted out whether they actually use that, but oh my God, I laughed so hard.
It's so funny to see this really muddy digital print, which once again, you can probably do a better job of this transfer. I know this thing wasn't available at all, not on DVD, nothing for years and years and years. There were some kind of rights issues. I don't know all the details of that, but someone smartly, literally just a week ago, there was an article at the beginning of the month being like, 28 years later is coming out and no digital copy will be available to stream anywhere. And then 2 days, like the day I recorded our conversation, I added an addendum to say, hey, it's on Pluto, everybody, because the same headlines that I was looking at were like, actually, it is now available on Pluto. So, someone was smart enough to get it out there in time for the movie, because I'm sure it was the number one thing streaming on Pluto. I'm sure it's going to have tons of streams this week. But it's really interesting to revisit this. And I've had this experience before when I revisited this movie, which I've seen, who knows, 4 or 5 times at this point, that some of this really cheap, low budget digital photography is so effective. It looks great. The empty city at sunrise, which is incredible that they were able to shoot with literally carving out 10, 15 minutes at a time. If you see the behind the scenes, where they were allowed over the course of a few weeks to just get like 10 minutes where they would stop all the traffic, and they were just getting these individual shots, then piecing it all together, and then being careful. Like, there can't be any planes in the air. There can't be, they were trying to avoid birds flying through the shots to make it really feel isolated. But that looks really good. There's that scene where he has the Jim has the nightmare that he's alone, and he wakes up and he's suddenly like terrified of being in the field by himself. Looks actually really great on this cheap grain. But then there's a lot of stuff that's shot inside, which is so muddy you can't see anything. But then you see like the big final sequence where you have all those sculptures inside of the that army facility, and it's all like lit up in red, and that looks fantastic. Like, it's just so weird that these cameras obviously had a lot of limitations, but some things still hold up now, and some things look absolutely terrible, especially in retrospect. Especially with digital now looks, you can shoot in any kind of, that's the miracle of digital now, right? You can shoot in incredibly low light and it looks great. You just process it afterwards and make it look fantastic.
I feel like, the digital photography does make you feel like you're really there. Like, technology's kind of disappeared in this world just 28 days later after this outbreak. But it's just like, just the rubbish and the smell, and you can just feel it all in just this. It's like looking, through a garbage can. I don't know.
Yes,
but it really puts you.
It sells it somewhat. Yeah, I agree. I think it works. Yeah.
But that's so funny. I do remember reading an interview with Danny Boyle saying that there was hundreds and thousands of people just outside the frame
exactly.
waiting to get on with their day, work. Waiting to commute. But it's so effective. Those scenes when he was walking through all the iconic London landmarks are just, it blows you away. It is insane, and you realize it's not digital effects.
Right.
There. He's really there, and the music as well.
Oh, great music.
I think is it original music. It just goes on and on and on, and it's just like this repetitive kind of drone that just puts you in it. And they use the motif through the next film as well, right. And it just it's so eerie and so unsettling that it's so effective.
Yeah, the score is original, especially that iconic score that I'm sure we're going to hear again in 28 years later. Also, the soundtrack uses Godspeed You Black Emperor as well, which is another one, very much of that droney type of music, that sound. Yeah, the score is fantastic and become iconic in and of itself. Yeah, the composer of that is John Murphy is actually the composer of that theme. And a lot of I'd say about half the soundtrack is his original compositions. And there's a Godspeed You Black Emperor and Brian Eno as well. So a lot of atmospheric music that's on the soundtrack, and really excellent soundtrack as well. Different than like his previous, his other soundtracks are iconic for covers that kind of reinvent popular songs and just rediscovering some punk rock or a Blondie song or whatever, or New Order famously in Trainspotting. So it's a lot of that is in a lot of ways like reintroducing people to retro pop music of a previous era. But in this case, it's almost all atmospheric and really effective, I think.
I can't say enough about it, and they do reference that type of walking through apocalyptic city in the second film as well, which is effective. It is effective, but not as iconic as this 28 Days Later.
Agreed. I completely agree. And we have to talk about 28 Weeks Later, because I had the opposite experience in revisiting that film, where I think in some ways, as much as I appreciate 28 Days Later, I think I enjoyed it even more now than I've had in the past. And in watching 28 Weeks Later, which in my memory was like, it's not that memorable, but pretty good. And then watching it again, I'm like, man, this is so poor in comparison to 28 Days Later, my opinion. But I can't wait to get your opinion of that because that's something that's been much less visited. Oh, and of course, I don't know if I mentioned this, but we bring it Alex Garland as the writer of The Beach. He writes the script for 28 Days Later, and then he will continue to work with Boyle on and off for the rest of his career, and is, of course, the writer of a trilogy of films that begins with this 20 years later.
I mean, what an incredible artistic force Alex Garland has become.
He really has.
I mean, just incredible novels and then incredible screenplays and then going on to direct. I mean, it feels like he's super prolific right now as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's churning them out recently. Yeah,
yeah. It's just it's mind blowing.
Yeah, I think he's another film that he's directing already, and of course, in the meantime, has these 28 movies coming out interspersed throughout those new films as well. All right, let's break down the movie a little bit. Just we don't have to go beat for beat because it's a pretty simple story, but there were some things that really jumped out at me. Feel free to throw in anything additional you want to. But the first thing I thought was great, especially because I watched this after I watched 28 Weeks Later. And my big critique of that was it just seemed like the script was like such a mess to me. It's just like, how did they get here? What's going on here? Like, it's just, and very, very early in 28 Days Later. And this is maybe a little lesson for anybody who's screenwriting out there, who cares about screenwriting. I just love this little detail. It's so small, and there's a whole world contained inside of it. And it's the simple fact that we see Jim wake up. He gets out of bed. He tries to open the door. It's locked. And then he looks down and we see through the crack in the bottom of the door, the key at his feet. And then he uses the key to unlock his door. And I love this efficiency of this. I just thought it's so, and I'm sure this is in Garland's script, but what a beautiful way of telling you this guy's in a coma. The hospital is being overrun. Someone was conscientious enough to be like, we can't leave this guy unguarded. So we'll lock the door, but I'm going to throw the key underneath so that he can unlock the door if this guy ever happens to wake up again, right? And it's like you suddenly imagine another person, the circumstances that person's living in, and the actions they took. You've just built a world in your mind with this tiny little detail, which also closes like a plot hole. Like you could imagine a version of this where he wakes up, can't get out, or there's a piece of furniture on the other side, or something fell against the door, or he has to smash a window to get out. But you don't get all that little detail of like, oh, like there was a person there being attacked by a zombie, possibly trying to save Jim, this future version of Jim. And it's just like a little bit of humanity in a script, by the way, that is a very humane script, I have to say. There's like open-heartedness here in the film, which I was surprised to almost forgotten about that.
That's why it's good to have these conversations with you, Victor, because I completely missed that detail in my rewatch of it.
Those are the details I pay attention to.
But you're so right. That's so good. And if you can imagine that person's plight outside the door when everything was going down, and there's a guy in a coma who is completely helpless. I mean, that is stunning.
Yeah, and this guy's just sleeping on the other side of the door.
I feel like it draws references from is it The Day of the Triffids, where
yes,
the guy he had his eyes wrapped up so he didn't see the meteor shower that everyone else saw. So that's why he was the man alone, because he was the only person that could see when everyone else was blind. So I do feel like it drew from that a little bit. And Cillian Murphy is all by himself.
Yeah, that definitely, that is a direct reference that I think Alex Garland has. And that also is the abandoned cities, and some of that iconography is also right from the Day of the Triffids as well, which is a terrific story with an incredibly silly adaptation. By the way, totally skipped it here in my notes because I had forgotten about this as well when I was watching the film. The film actually opens with these monkeys being rescued from by these Greenpeace type activists. These animal activists, they inadvertently unleash this virus. And it's really interesting to me, another theme that we've seen in Garland's work, this unforeseen consequences of someone trying to do the right thing and actually unleashing death on the rest of humanity, inadvertently, of course. But at the same time, like this was a weapon that was being developed by the military, right? So it's like this double-edged sword. But I had completely forgotten this. Was this something that you remembered when you think about this movie?
It was not. Yeah, it was a surprise. I was like, when is this movie starting? What's this bit?
What is this? Is it commercial? Is it a trailer?
And they call it the rage virus. So
right.
They reference the rage throughout them, but they never say the word zombie.
Yeah, absolutely not. And yeah, very importantly, maybe it would have been a straight up zombie film if zombies were marketable in some way at the time. But this was a true reboot. They were trying to be original in this. And of course, these are fast moving zombies because they're not like dead, decomposing corpses. Basically, rabid is basically what they are. So single mindedly fixated on spreading the virus, they forget to eat. So that's their weakness. That eventually they will starve to death. Some other observations here. Naomi Harris. We just saw Naomi Harris in Black Bag this year. Has this woman aged a day in 25 years?
Oh my God, I didn't realize that was her. Yeah, okay. She looks incredible in this film, in both films.
Yeah. The other thing is there was obviously Pepsi promotional money in this movie.
There certainly was, yes. Well, it was a budget of 8 million. It made 80 plus. So
They definitely had promotional partners, and the Pepsi was one of them, apparently. They're walking around with cans of Pepsi. Like they'll have conversations. The Pepsi sign is right in the face as they're drinking. It's very funny.
that's so funny. She plays a really cool character in this. And I do
Yes.
like very early on when she's interacting with Cillian Murphy, she's like, "Oh, what are you going to think? What do you think? We're going to fall in love and have sex or something?"
Right.
Like
Exactly.
she throws it straight out there. So you're like, "Oh, well, that's obviously not going to happen."
And indeed it does. Even her heart melts for this. If anything, there's an interesting trajectory here in the film that Jim, of course, is reluctant to be violent. He hesitates to kill. The
It's
father
Brendan
starts to turn.
Gleeson's
Brendan
character.
Gleeson's character, yeah. Obviously, another big name here in the movie. He potentially might have not been able to kill Brendan Gleeson's character in time. One of the soldiers is nearby and ends up killing him. He has killed somebody at this point. He kills that boy, and that's the arc basically of the story to some extent. Wakes up into this world, and then Naomi Harris, of course, brutally murders that guy who maybe she was romantically. I don't even know if they were boyfriend girlfriend. If it was just some guy who was tagging along, but she kills him pretty quickly when she needs to, and she doesn't hesitate. But then we see Murphy becoming this more and more violent person. And then there's almost like that moment later in the film where we see Murphy and she's questioning, is he, just raging out because of the situation, or is he infected with the rage virus, right? So like I think the movie's asking at that point, like this rage virus is in us all the time.
And it's interesting that we don't know anything about Murphy's character from the start. He's almost like a baby being born
Yes,
into this world. All we
exactly.
know that he was a delivery driver and he lives with his parents. So
Exactly.
there's nothing. So everything that we find out is him progressing and learning how to adapt in this new world.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on that. That if you look at Garland's scripts, especially his earlier ones, there is very much this metaphor for growing up. And it's exactly what you're saying. He's like a babe, in the hospital, like a baby being born. He goes back to his parents' house, finds no comfort there. He has a found family, which is an atomic family. He needs to become the father in the family. And then he, reverts almost to like some primal man. But then in the end, that's where the humanity of the script comes in. It's all to rescue that family. And then we have this idyllic finale which wasn't the original ending, by the way. The ending had one of the endings they toyed with was a much darker ending. But I think I like the fact that the film gives you this little bit of light there at the end.
I was very surprised, even rewatching it, that it had such a happy ending. I thought it was
Right.
going to end terribly, and I had in my memory there was a car crash right at the end. I felt and a freeze frame, and I thought it was going to end like that, which I thought would have been fine. But yeah, very happy families at the end.
Yeah, I love the tone shift in that Boyle pulls off so well here when we shift earlier on from, he meets Naomi Harris. There's the sequence where they return to the parents' home. They decide to stay there. He's watching videos in the middle of the night, which potentially is the reason that the infected attack. She just takes it in stride, by the way. I just had to murder her partner, but hey, what else can I do? And it's just like on to the next home. But I guess you're just like at that point, just accepting things as they come. And then, yeah, in a way, they find a family along the way, of course. I love the sequence in the tunnel for a few reasons. I love when they're riding over all the other cars, and there's that almost like they're on an amusement park ride, like a family on a family trip, and they're all like, "Whoa!" They're having such a great time. And of course, then the flat comes, and the infected streaming through the tunnel like the rats that they're chasing precede them. Incredible. And what a suspenseful sequence that is in the tunnel.
And Brendan Gleeson's so good in
So
this
good.
film.
Yes.
It feels like this was about the time when he was in every second British film
Yeah.
and every fifth American film. He was
Right.
everywhere. And he's such a friendly, fatherly presence. I feel like it needed someone just to anchor the film and just to make it a little bit more safe because it was so horrible. There was no safe place. And he was providing a giant presence and everyone was happy to go along with him.
And then he's shooing away that crow and he gets him infected. I gotta say, if it's that infectious, they're like any like getting blood spatter on your eyes, I have to call a little BS on this. That this, a lot more people would have, very few people would have survived this thing at all. Considering like when you're smashing one of these things in the head, you're probably going to get spattered, and when you're on your mouth or on your eyes or something. But apparently, that one drop is enough to infect him. But it is a beautiful shot, like that. The drop descending in like the color red. What a beautiful way to convey that.
And it doesn't infect any animals. Is that right? I feel like they said it doesn't infect animals, but it affects the monkeys at the start or the chimps at the start. So
I guess because we are pretty similar to DNA wise to the chimps. I would assume that's the case because they ask you, you're absolutely right. There at one point, there's this beautiful scene where they're all sleeping in this field. And she asks, they like are kind of just appreciating the beauty of the horses running by, and they're like, do you think that they're infected? And they're like, no, they're not infected. And I believe that that's probably correct because they probably would be trying to like bite each other's faces off if that was the case. But they it has apparently not infected other animals, which is kind of nice, right? It's just kind of getting people out of the way and everybody else could just move on with their lives. But unless you're a primate, if you're a primate, you're in trouble.
Yeah, there was a line where it was about nature getting back to normal.
Yeah.
Like humans are the abnormality in the history of the earth. So it's might just the virus is just kicking us off because we've had our time. I would not be sleeping in that field, by the way. I would be up all night. I do not
if
care.
there's one infected nearby,
Valium.
Right? Exactly.
There's no way. So yeah, I could definitely relate with his nightmares of waking up and everyone gone.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that his dream is not a nightmare that he's gotten bitten in the night. His nightmare is that they've abandoned him and he's alone. That is more terrifying to him than the actual infection. So maybe in some ways, if you just knock yourself out in the middle of the night with a Valium and you die in the middle of the night, it's like maybe that's preferable to the alternative of dying in terror.
Yes.
Or alone, just starving to death somewhere on your own. But you'll never run out of snack food and Coca-Cola or Pepsi's. No Coca-Colas, only Pepsi. Coca-Cola does not exist in this universe, which is another Danny Boyle connection I'll have to get to at some point. But we'll leave that for next week. So yeah, so then of course the military shows up at that point and rescues them temporarily and takes them to this compound where it's interesting. I'm not sure these type of little nitpicks I'm going to make now, for some reason bothered me a lot more when I saw the film previously and not so much now. But there's a real shift after they get to the military. The point of the film kind of shifts. Garland, I am sure that some of this dialogue you described where they're having these philosophical arguments about, what is the norm? Is man by definition violent or not? What is the purpose of women if not to procreate? These type of questions that, of course, come up in Garland's films in general, the violence and the misogyny of culture. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that some of those conversations were much larger than the version that Boyle brought to the screen. But also, there's also this fairy tale imagery. Like I said, it has some very dramatic lighting. We have these sculptures everywhere. The women at the end, as the movie reaches its climax, are dressed up in like these gowns. It all like starts to feel like we got into some kind of weird fairy tale world. And I'm not sure it adds anything to the conclusion of the film other than just that's, I think, would be my critique of Boyle, that sometimes he does something stylish or something different just to be stylish or different. And it doesn't always add. But I have to say, maybe because I just expected it after seeing this movie multiple times, it just didn't bother me as much as it did before. Although I still feel like the film is perfect for me up until they get to the compound. And then it's it's still interesting and it has some very good moments in it, but it's not as good as the lead up to that finale.
That's interesting. Yeah, it definitely did change tones, and I thought it felt quite stereotypical, but that
Yes,
is
it
because
becomes
I've
more
seen
generic. Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Yeah, I've seen this in The Walking Dead at least a couple of times where they
yes. Mhm.
find sanctuary and then they're welcomed in, but then it feels like the leader is egomaniacal and has his own agenda, and these people are obviously going to react against his agenda. But I feel like I've seen it a lot more since 28 Days Later rather than this playing out like that. But yeah, I did like the imagery of the statues in there and the way that they've I think it says a bit about class as well because they're all
Yeah.
in uniforms, but they've taken over this like stately manner. Um, yeah, but it got a bit more darker and a little bit less interesting for me too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it feels a little more generic. And you're right that this template has been copied over and over again. But I remember even when I saw it, it was a little less surprising than I would have hoped that like maybe the lead up had been up until that point. And because I had seen years ago, because it came out in the early 80s, the George Romero, The Day of the Dead, which is set on a military compound, and it's about all of this. And the most generous thing I could say is that, and I'm pretty sure this is true, is that this was like an homage to, they do a little Night of the Living Dead. They don't really do Dawn of the Dead. Maybe they do when they go shopping, so it's a little wink at Dawn of the Dead. So maybe they're doing all the Dead movies in one movie where you have Night of the Living Dead. They're all in a house being invaded by zombies. In Dawn of the Dead, they're trapped in the mall, and there's a lot of sequences where everybody's like having the consumer fantasy of buying everything and camping in the middle of the mall. This is the Romero's version, although I like the remake as well. And then, of course, which we have see just a little bit where they kind of go on their little shopping sprees together as a family, and they don't have to pay. They just leave the credit cards out. They're like, hey, this is unnecessary, which we've also seen in like Zombieland, for example. So that's kind of a wink there. And then, of course, Day of the Dead which is the end of that trilogy. They end up on a military compound. The military is like fascistic. They're trying to run experiments on the zombies. So once again, I feel like they're trying to pack all three of the Romero movies into one movie. And at the time, that makes sense, right? Because you think about Shaun of the Dead, which was like winking at those old movies also. And at the time, that was very fresh because there wasn't like 25 zombie movies every year. This is a very rare occurrence, right? So they were kind of packing everything in there. And I guess that's what they're trying to do. I just find that in general, like also in the Romero movies, I find that film the least interesting of them, although maybe the most thematically interesting. But as in execution, just a bunch of people inside of a compound waiting to be killed by zombies. And of course, the zombies, by definition, can't easily get in, is not as interesting, until, of course, they all swarm at the end.
Yeah. And they're going to get in eventually.
Of course, it has to. That's just of course, it has to. That has to be the case.
But I did think where they dressed the women up in the red dresses and
Yeah.
one of them obviously was the daughter under 8. I mean, that was very creepy.
Yes.
Very creepy. And the fact that she was trying to feed her drugs and she says, are you trying to kill me? No, I'm just going to try to make this be acceptable. Well, not acceptable, but so that you can actually live through this. I mean, that is really dark, and I quite liked exploring those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, because the film is a bit of even though that's shot like a fairy tale at the end, the fairy tale is the earlier part where you have this beautiful family unit and there is no sexual terror or anything, right? And then, of course, they're safe, quote unquote, and now that part of culture has come back into it. That like the danger of masculinity. I know you're not a big fan of Garland's Men, but he hit that he hit that theme really, really hard in that movie. Once again, things that Garland has been curious about throughout his career. This is why I like to watch someone's, appreciate the individual elements, but I do like to think about people's films like in the context of their work. Like, what are they trying to say, develop from one film to the other? Anyway, so Garland, this is some of his hobby horses here explained once again. Still, even now, didn't bother me as much as it has in the past. I just still think the end is the weakest part of the film. But there's some fun things there too, some interesting things minimally. Oh, one thing that I will also be a little critical of is I think, and maybe this was a choice that was made after the fact, there's something intriguing in seeing Jim, who's looking for this parental figure as he's going through this journey. And he has this kindly father figure in Gleason who dies. And now he has this more brutal version of masculinity that's pitching itself to him. And at one point, they're like, we need women to repopulate the world. And you can actually see that both sides of that argument. I mean, it's not a pretty thing, but it is a necessity for survival, of course. And there's that ugly aspect to it. But we can't even really dwell on that too much because it ends up being correct what that outlier soldier tells him when they're all chained up, saying that he's crazy. It's not even true. The UK is just quarantined. If we could just get off this island, we'll be fine. And of course, later when he's running away, he looks up in the sky when he gets knocked down or he falls down and he sees a jet plane flying overhead. So, which indicates to us that yes, like the world is not collapsed. There is a society out there somewhere, which of course is verified by the end of the film. But it does let him off the hook a little bit because it would be really tough if he has to decide, like, am I going to live with these men and let them do this to these women? Or am I going to be like, well, we're just going to strike out on our own and hope for the best?
Yeah, it's super interesting because I mean, it is only 28 days.
Days.
Are you really thinking about
repopulating? Chill out.
I mean, it's still about survival as far as I'm concerned. But it did say that he almost got these men on board by promising them women.
Yeah.
So we saw these leering looks, and then we didn't realize until that information was conveyed to us that he promised them women. There's women now, so let's go. I mean,
a 28-day dry spell is not that long a dry spell, I gotta say, guys.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Come on. Even in college, they were 28-day dry spells. Come on.
Although looking at most of those guys, they'd probably been
they've had a very long dry spell. Well, they're in the military, so who knows how long the dry spell's been going. So they might have been deployed. Who knows? Yeah, some other things I really didn't like at the end. Most of these things I have written down are things I didn't like. Although overall, very much love this film, by the way. And it's iconic, utterly iconic. But the freeze frame, which we've seen in so many Danny Boyle movies, I'm like, I don't think we need it now. This is not the place for the freeze frame, by the way. But yes, turns out we come back from that freeze frame, cut to black, which is goofy. It doesn't it's not terrifying. It's goofy. You almost have to make Jim survive at that point because you can't really go from that goofy, like, oh my God, the kid's driving the car. And then Jim died. So, he survives. Then we have this beautiful ending. I love, once again, just some incredible visual work here. I love that split second where we see him wake up. We see the world is upside down, literally. And we see the word hell, out of context. We have no idea what that is. But they're actually stitching together, making that sign, hello. And of course, they're trying to get the attention of one of those jets flying overhead. And we see the dead starving. And it's a happy ending. After
that shot was amazing.
Beautiful shot.
When he woke up, I mean, I was my brain was trying to make sense of how that was composed. Yeah, it just stunning. And I did like how Naomi was sewing her red dress into the sign to add to the help. Very symbolic there. And finally it seemed like there'd been jets passing over before and they hadn't seen them. Yeah. And finally this one sees them. Yeah.
Oh, and of course, absolutely stunning, beautiful shots from the plane racing through this valley and that beautiful widescreen shot of the hell upside down before they add the O and all of that. But of course, very importantly, shot in widescreen, 35 millimeter shot, or maybe even wider, not shot on digital video. And the contrast, of course, is really compelling, right? Like that ending really feels warm and inviting, and they've been rescued, everybody, and it's all that is because he's using the, traditional film stock and beautiful lighting, natural lighting to make you feel like, there's hope in the world again.
I didn't know that, but that definitely is the feeling that you get when you see them flying through and you see that point of view of the plane flying through the valley. You definitely get that feeling. So that's very interesting.
The last 2 minutes of this movie must have cost as much as the rest of the movie combined. So that's 28 days later. Let's talk about 28 weeks later. I have a lot of things to say. I'm going to be honest here. They're not very good. But before I put my thumb on the scale, what's your experience of having seen 28 Weeks Later initially? And how do you feel about it on this revisit?
Yeah, okay. So I had no memory. I'd obviously seen it
Yeah.
before on DVD, but I had no memory of it. So I was very surprised at Jeremy Renner. It's probably the first time that we've
Yeah.
seen him in a film. Big movie star. Rose Byrne was also a surprise to
Idris
see
Elba. I forgot he was
her
in the movie at
her and
all.
Idris Elba. Yeah, for sure. Was that maybe just after The Wire or before The Wire? Um, so it was great seeing these crew in the film, and I did like the way that it made sense that it was 28 weeks later. So we saw a whole different perspective on London. We saw a safe zone, and we saw very militarized, and the perspectives from the different people. We still saw a London that was kind of empty, especially later in the film. But I did like the way that it just expanded the viewpoint from a very singular vision into something a little bit bigger. I appreciate that, so I was
Yeah.
going with it. Yeah, for about halfway.
Robert Carlyle, of course. This is not a Danny Boyle film. He's just the executive producer on there, and as is Alex Garland. But usually, when you get an executive producer type title in a movie like this, it just means like they attach your name so that they can get the movie made and tell everybody, hey, from the makers of 28 Days Later, like very tenuously from the makers of 28 Days Later. But I don't think they've ever disparaged. Oh, another face on here that you probably wouldn't recognize, but Harold Perrineau is here from Lost, which of course this is at the peak of his fame when Lost was on the air. So just a lot of people that I honestly forgot were here, that very recognizable actors. Oh yeah, him. Oh, him. Oh yeah.
I was actually shocked. Talking to you last week, I didn't realize Danny Boyle didn't direct this. So
Yes.
I didn't find out about that until I read the film finished and I saw the opening director credit and I was like, oh, I have got to think about this very differently now.
But it's really interesting when you see someone basically trying to shoot something in the style of somebody else. It's not their native style. And that's the thing I would say that I separates a Danny Boyle for me versus someone who's like a Michael Bay. I don't always like the stylistic choices that Boyle is making, but he's trying to do something with the stylistics as opposed to like a Michael Bay or honestly this film. They're like, we want a jump scare. So like while Robert Kylo's talking to his kids, they just like literally with the sound cranked up all the way, they just have a random shot of a zombie like close up jumping at the camera. And then we cut back. Like there was a lot of hyper stylistic attacks, that type of editing in the Danny Boyle film and in Danny Boyle films in general, but they're usually adding some commentary. What we were seeing oftentimes added nothing. It was out of context even. It was really irritating, to be honest, for me.
That makes sense. Yeah, that is the feeling that you get from it for sure.
Originally, my Letterboxd review, my rating, I should say, was 3 stars because my recollection of it was what a great opening scene. And honestly, I remember vaguely, there's the safe zone in London. I remember Rose Byrne was in it. Jeremy Renner helps the kids rescues the family at the end. The kids escape at one point and Renner's tracking them. Like I remember these very basic things, but that's it. 80% of this movie was barely in my recollection. It was just really the opening sequence. And this movie starts off with an incredible opening sequence, really excellent. Just a standalone short film if anybody wants to watch it. And this is when Robert Carlyle escapes and he thinks his wife dies in this invasion. They seem to have, once again, another found family where they've settled into a routine when, of course, the infected eventually show up and ruin everything. They always ruin everything. Eventually, we catch up with the family. The kids had been away at school, at camp or something, and then they reunite with the dad. And then there's this whole situation where the dad is lying to them about what actually happened to the mom. The kids decide to wander off and these kids ruin everything. Like literally they wander off. They want to get a picture of the mother because the kid has lost his memories of her, is afraid of losing his memories of her. Turns out she's alive because she has some kind of immunity to this thing, but she's still a carrier. It just doesn't affect her, conveniently enough. They bring her back and all hell breaks loose when he goes to give her a kiss and gets infected. And then, of course, as you would expect, the dominoes start falling and everybody in London starts getting massacred by the powers that be to prevent any further infection. And that doesn't sound like a terrible idea for a movie. It's pretty inconsequential in the mythology of 28 Days Later, right? It's just like, London got wiped out. But as far as we knew, London was like wiped out to start with. So it didn't really make that much of a difference. You could pretty much, I think, as a matter of fact, the filmmakers have said, or Garland at least, they asked him, is 28 Weeks Later canonical? And he said, you don't have to watch 28 Weeks Later, but nothing in 28 Weeks Later negates anything in 28 years later. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then when I saw the movie again, I'm like, oh, because nothing really consequential happens in this movie. That's why it doesn't really matter. So long story short, people, you can skip this one if you don't want to watch it again.
But the situation with Robert, first of all, that escape at the start, I was like, oh, found family, yeah, whatever, we've seen this forever.
Yeah.
But then the action sequence where he escapes,
fantastic, yes.
Brilliant,
so good.
And the idea that he sees his life partner,
yes,
get bitten, but not really. But he didn't see her get bitten, but he did kind of see her disappear, or he just needed to make an exit. He gave her up for dead.
Well, not for nothing, but if I see her in that window, am I going to go in that building? I mean, he's not going to survive if he goes in there.
But he didn't see her bitten. I don't think he did. And he made that false memory. I think that is a brilliant idea. And the fact that she comes back into it and they've got to deal with that as a couple, I think is really awesome. Yeah. But they didn't progress it. Once he turns rage, and once he kills her or she dies somehow, that relationship is gone, and that interest and that kind of awkwardness that could develop between their family unit and the kids, and it could be passed. I think that's fascinating. But that idea just got ditched.
Yeah, this is the fatal flaw here. It's the directorial style annoys me for sure. But that's not the fatal flaw in this film. It's the script. The script is terrible because after that awesome opening, which I'm sure someone like sold this sequel on that opening sequence, the simple fact is like nothing makes sense after that. And not only does it not make sense in the sequence of things that happen, it's that like you mentioned, you have set up that this husband abandoned his wife and now has to deal the consequences of that. But that's not what the film is about. Then it's like, oh, good, you should have shot her in the head before you left. You would have prevented all this from happening, right? Like it doesn't. I mean, that's not the intention of how you read the film, but that basically is the fact of it, right? It's not like, oh, and if he had just done the right thing, this never would have happened. It's like, no, she was going to infect everybody either way. Like it just would have happened sooner. But then, of course, all of that falls apart because just to allow this sequence of events to happen, the military has to bring this woman in without quarantine. They bring him in there without quarantine. And then, like I was talking about how I thought it was very clever that the key under the door kind of explains all these things we need to understand. That all of a sudden they're like, this guy who's quarantined with this woman has to bust out, even though he's obviously infected, and then start attacking people. And we see it all from his POV because, it doesn't make any sense. Who let him out? Who doesn't shoot this guy when he's coming at them? They're using that like frenetic style to just show him like attacking 25 different people. But how did that happen? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Did they just leave him alone in the building? Like go see the infected woman and don't get infected. Okay. Be on your best behavior in there. It's just insane. And then the payoff of this, by the way, where the kids have to like kill the dad, as if that was what we were trying to resolve here. It's like, they're not the ones who have to deal with this thing. He's the one who committed the original sin. What is this whole thing where the underground? It's like, it really feels like someone writing something like, oh, what will be cool here is all of a sudden here at the end of the line, there's the dad and she has to confront her demons. I'm like, what demons? Her dad's the one who did the thing in the first place. Like if the dad somehow overcame his zombiness to let her pass or something, then there would be something going on there. But I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all.
Very silly seeing him come back at the end. I mean,
so silly. Like he's been tracking them somehow, like this crazy random rapid person.
He does have that all access areas pass. So maybe he
That's right.
still knew how to use that being consumed by the rage virus, and he could still track them. Yeah. But also Jeremy Renner's character, we didn't really know much about him. Oh, he likes looking through windows and perving at people. So
Yeah.
therefore he will, flip on on the military and
Mhm.
then go off on his own. Yeah, I didn't buy that either.
And that's what once again, the problem with like thematically trying to get anything from this film, because you could have a read on the film that like he should not have done the right thing. But even like I'm looking at Letterboxd right now, and even these 5-star reviews for this movie, like an underappreciated masterpiece, they're all talking about how this is about like the overreach of the military. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He breaks ranks with the military. The military tries to exterminate all these people. And him trying to rescue these kids, he infects the rest of the world. That is not what this is about. The military is right. He's the one who should have been on their side and wiped these kids out. Everybody will be fine. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think the film
exactly.
is saying what it thinks it's saying. It's the point I'm trying to make.
And is there a button at the end? I can't even remember the end. Is there a button at the end that goes into a next to hint at another sequel? I can't even remember.
Yes, so that is there's a little bit of a hint. There is one cool thing. Well, it's cool, but it's also the stupidest thing that happens in the entire film. So there's one cool thing that happens is when Harold Perrineau, as the pilot of the helicopter, he sees all the people coming, the zombies, and he's like,
Oh yeah.
"Grr, I'm going to get rid of all of you," and he mows them all down with the chopper blade, which first of all is impossible because a chopper blade can't get that low. At this point, you have to really just this is like an Avengers movie or something silliness, or just like a dumb zombie movie at this point. But the craziest thing about it is these supposedly in the mythology of this show, of this series, these are just people who are rabid. They're not like actually undead zombies, and you literally see people with holes in their chests. Their arms have been removed. Part of their head is off, and they're wandering around like, "Argh." I'm like, okay, so now they're supernatural. What the hell is happening over here? Anyway, this is just, as you can tell, it's just kind of at the end of my rope by the time we get to the end of this movie. And, but they were, yeah, so he does the thing with the guillotine, which is kind of cool, actually. I thought that was kind of fun, even though I'm critical of it. It still was just a cool visual. And then, yeah, they get onto the plane. He like settles the plane down after he guillotines everybody. The kids get on, but we see one of the kids has the discolored eye, which is the indication that they're infected, but they are carriers, but not infected. And then they fly off. And then we hear on the soundtrack at the end, and this might have even been an extra shooting because it's so cheap to do, but we hear soundtrack and we start hearing from the United States and from France that there is signs of infection.
That's right. That's
and
right.
then the last shot, the very, very last shot, the button is this, like, once again, that really manic, shaky cam of like super zoomed in of all these infected charging at the camera. And you could barely make this out, by the way. It's so badly done because it's so shaky. But in the background behind them is the Eiffel Tower. So this is now France that is fully overrun, or Paris at least, fully overrun by the infected, which would indicate, of course, that this has spread from the UK. So yeah, it would indicate that, you could go beyond that and the infection just continues to spread throughout the world.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the chopper flew to France and then it got out. Or I assume that they got through the tunnel, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they flew all the way to. I don't know if they could have just flown. Yeah, they could have got through the tunnel. Not the helicopter. It would be like Mission Impossible. Yeah. But yeah, he got them away, and then eventually they, whatever, they were probably it was probably a similar thing. They were just like quarantined and. And sometimes I don't even remember how Rose Byrne died. Like, how did she die in this thing? I don't even remember. So some of these characters disappear without real explanation. But yeah, this was not impressive. And they actually do a really beautiful job in 28 Weeks Later, I have to say, on a pretty limited budget of creating this quarantined area of London. I thought they did a really nice job of that. So that I have to give it credit for. And some of the design work, especially in the opening sequence, beautiful, like just being out in those London suburbs and the infected running through those fields. It's really kind of really beautifully done. So that production wise, I am impressed with a lot of those things. But 28 Days Later gives you not only some really amazingly, like you said, you have every possible scenario of a zombie movie in one film, but it also has these really beautiful character interactions, little details. Like I love when they show up at Brendan Gleeson's house with the girls, and he has Christmas decorations up and there's Christmas carols. He's like trying to make his daughter have this experience, like, oh yeah, it's still, I'm still trying to be your dad. I'm still trying to make you remember that you're a kid. And there's just all these little character details that are just even in the set decoration. And that's the biggest critique I have of 28 Weeks Later. There's like nobody in this film that I care about at all. I don't know anything about them. I don't know why they're, it literally is like this person's here for plot, and then they have to do the next thing in the plot. And nobody is interesting or has an interesting arc, or I care about them. The kids are really annoying. It's not their performances, it's just their annoying characters. And yeah, it's just, this did not work for me at all. I'm not going to revisit this movie ever.
No, I think I'm done now. I think I've seen it twice.
Maybe the opening scene. Maybe the opening scene again. I will.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, and to see Robert Carlyle. Yeah. So the next movie, 28 years later. So
Yes.
Are we to assume that it's taken over the whole of the Earth, or is this going to be set? I've seen the trailer, but it doesn't really tell me anything. Is it still going to be set in London? Surely there'll be scenes of London again.
I mean, the cast is mostly British. I have, this is not, if people are here to hear my speculation on 28 years later, I honestly don't know how this is, because if these are not supernatural zombies, what is going on 28 years later? Is it just the culture that has collapsed? I have to assume the virus is still part of the story, because then why else even bother making the connection otherwise? So I'm very curious as to how they're going to tie these things together, and maybe the virus mutated in some way. Maybe they become more traditional zombies. I don't know. I don't know these things, and I also don't know if this is still isolated to the UK. And then this is like, maybe it's a metaphor for being isolationist and becoming cut off from everybody else because you're afraid of infection. So that could be an interesting direction they take things. But I am just speculating here because I have very much intentionally not spoiled myself on anything. I don't even understand the premise of this film, honestly. So I'm trying to go in as absolutely unknowing as I can in this circumstance. So.
Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I saw the trailer, but I don't think it really told anything of the story. Yeah. But I do see that there is already a sequel for next year.
Yes, already shot. Coming out in January.
Already shot.
Already shot.
Interesting. Yes. 28 years later, The Bone Temple.
The Bone Temple. Yeah. And so that's been shot already, also based on Garland's script. They only had budget for 1 and 2. I was talking to my wife about this just this weekend. Did not have funding for 3. And they're like, we hope we make some money on these so we can finish our new trilogy. But just so, for anyone who's not aware, this trailer for this movie has the second most views of any horror film ever, only behind It, which of course made hundreds of millions of dollars, 700 actually. And also that this has now had more ticket pre-sales than Sinners or the new Final Destination film. And Sinners has now made $400 million internationally, and Final Destination's made around $300 million. So all that is to say that this is probably going to outpace those films. If this makes between $300 and $400 million, we're definitely getting the third movie. Don't worry about that.
All right, so I'm confused. I thought 28 years later is the final movie of a trilogy, but it sounds like it's the first movie of a new trilogy.
Yes, it's very confusing. They are shooting a trilogy, and yes, that's not 28 years later is the end of the trilogy. They are shooting a trilogy with these new characters in it, basically. So they have not written one script; they've written 3 scripts. So, and they've already shot 2 of them. So. It's quite a project, but you know what? They bet that this thing has grown in the 25 years since that first film, and they are correct. It has definitely grown as the zombie genre has grown as well.
Interesting. Yeah, well, my kids, they know of it. They have never seen these movies, but they know of them. So, so obviously the word gets around.
This is like it's going to be a phenomena in the way that Final Destination movie, or maybe even more so, has bridge that gap for the same reason you said. People who saw those movies in theaters are going to go see these movies. The both of these genres. I mean, both of these sequels I'm talking about. And then kids, like you said, like this younger generation, they've never seen Final Destination, or maybe rarely seen it, and they may have never seen 28 Days Later, or maybe saw it briefly on cable. but they know about it. It's in the ether, right? So it's like you have multiple generations that may appreciate it. So anyway, it's probably going to be hugely successful. I'm hopefully seeing it tomorrow night, and I'll keep you posted.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'll try to see it this weekend.
All right, perfect. And we will touch base again next week, and very much looking forward to this. Can't wait. Whether it's good or bad, I am so curious
Yeah.
about this. Yes.
You're pumped. It's great. Great to hear.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Thanks again, Darren, for the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks for the convo. Cheers.
All right, take care.